diamonds, adultery and execution, how the wives of 20th century dictators fared. What the wives of Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini and Nicolae Ceausescu were like, and how their fates unfolded before and after the overthrow of their husbands. Some of these women actively intervened in politics and were hated by their people as much as their infamous husbands. Others suffered and attempted suicide, unable to bear such a life. But one way or another, all these women have left their mark on history. Subscriptions and likes are welcome on my channel. Here we go. Katherine Dade, wife of Jean Bidel Bokassa. The Central African Republic is a former French colony that gained independence in 1960. For many decades, the richest diamond and gold deposits located on the territory of this state have been the cause of violent armed conflicts, outbreaks of violence and coups d'état. But the most barbaric time in the history of CAR was during the reign of Jean Bidel Bokassa. On the night of January 1, 1966, Colonel Bokassa and his followers seized power, overthrowing the previous president. The country's new leader established a strict authoritarian regime and declared that only death would force him to retire. Bokassa's bloody rule lasted 19 years and was remembered for regular arrests of dissidents and brutal torture, in which the president personally participated. One of his most brutal acts was the murder of 100 schoolchildren protesting the wearing of overpriced uniforms. Bokassa had a harem of 19 wives who bore him about 100 heirs. The president forcibly removed his future brides from their fathers' homes, and the most disobedient of them were sent to prison until the wedding day. Some of the dictators' wives tried to commit suicide or escape from the palace. However, their attempts were unsuccessful. But of particular note in this harem was Katherine Dade, the main wife, whom the inhabitants nicknamed Maman Katie. Bokassa clearly distinguished her from other women, lavishing her with luxurious gifts and inviting her to high society receptions. And in 1977, the dictator decided to be crowned with his beloved. Katherine's dress for the ceremony was made in the image of Josephine Beauharnais, first wife of Napoleon Bonaparte, and cost the state $72,400. Another $5 million was spent on the diamond crown and scepter. And finally, about $20 million was spent on a massive golden throne in the form of an eagle, Rolls-Royce, carriages, horses, and tons of food and drinks brought by airplanes from Europe. The cost of the coronation amounted to a quarter of the annual income of the Republic and contrasted sharply with the catastrophic poverty of the country's inhabitants. Katherine Dade quickly became accustomed to blood diamonds, designer dresses, and increased public attention. But this did not prevent her from betraying her husband twice by cheating on him with other men. It first happened in July 1973, after the dictator learned that Katherine had secretly and repeatedly visited the home of his close friend. He summoned the rival to his house and beat him with incredible cruelty. The lover died on the spot. Katherine got away with it. But her next lover was the French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Perhaps that is why, after the forces of the French army in the Republic was a coup d'état, Bokassa had to go on the run, and Katherine managed to settle in a luxurious castle near Paris. Carmen Polo, wife of Francisco Franco. Spain. Francisco Franco went down in history as an uncompromising and tough ruler, the last dictator of Western Europe and the closest friend of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. However, with his future wife, he met long before he became one of the most important political figures of the mid-20th century in 1917. Then Franco served in the rank of major in Oviedo. The local elite, which included Carmen Polo, gave him an extremely cold reception, derisively calling him El Comandantino, Major Ishko. But Franco already believed that there was no goal he could not achieve. Intending to make Carmen his wife, he began to consistently and persistently seek her attention, leaving her romantic notes in the hats of mutual friends and pockets of her clothes. The girl's family strongly disapproved of Franco. The girl's father believed that this poor major wants to get rich by marrying Carmen. But in reality, he was guided solely by romantic feelings. And soon Carmen surrendered under his pressure. In 1923, they played a wedding. But a few years after the marriage, from the romance was not a trace. From now on, the relationship between them could be characterized as a partnership, beneficial to both parties. Franco was too busy with his military, and later political, career to change anything in his personal life, Carmen found in himself the tasks of a grey cardinal and began to satisfy his ambition, actively interfering in the affairs of the spouse. She made his work schedules, included in the government of his favorites, getting rid of ministers who did not cause her sympathy. Carmen also showed herself in the legislative sphere, making the already difficult life of Spanish women frankly unbearable. She insisted that Spanish women were forbidden to leave the family. In addition, women lost the ability to take out loans, without a father's or husband's signature, become university professors and even act as witnesses in court. Needless to say, after this, Spanish women hated the dictator's wife. However, Carmen did not tolerate restrictions on herself. She was known for her love of exquisite headdresses, rare antiques and pearl jewelry. The Spaniards joked that the first thing Carmen did after waking up was to put a few strings of pearls around her neck, and only then did she get down to other tasks. For this they called her Dona Collars, Mrs. Necklace. Even when her husband passed away in 1975, she did not change her passion for jewelry. Carmen dressed in black clothes, over which 3 strings of pearls were always displayed. Eva Braun, Adolf Hitler's wife. Germany. Despite the fact that the Führer diligently tried to translate to society the image of a man married to his country, in his life was a favorite woman, the existence of which most of his contemporaries did not realize. He met Eva in 1929 in the photo studio where she worked. The future Führer immediately appreciated the excellent external data of the young girl and decided to get to know her better. Curiously, while Hitler was stubborn, assertive, and not tolerating any criticism of the politician, in communication with women he seemed a real gentleman. Subsequently, all female employees of the Reich Chancellery admired the chivalrous manners of the Führer and were ready to forever be faithful to him. Trying to get the heart of Eva, Hitler did not change his gentlemanly style, showered her with compliments, gave flowers and other nice trinkets, took her to the opera. And the girl literally melted. She literally breathed him, indulging in dreams of their life together. The more terrible was for her disappointment when she learned that she was not the only woman in Hitler's life. It turned out that in parallel with his courtship of Eva, he was sharing his bed with other secret mistresses. Miss Braun could not accept this and attempted suicide, but fate was favorable to her at that moment, and the girl survived. When Hitler was informed that his love for him made Eva take such a desperate step, his feelings for the girl changed. He began to take care of her as never before, and even presented a special gift, a set of pink tourmaline, which is considered a symbol of tender affection. Hitler literally piled beloved gifts, apartments, clothes, jewelry, antiques and even paintings of his own authorship. But their meetings were still held in the strictest secrecy. Only in 1939, Eva was allowed to move into an apartment in the Reich, which was adjacent to the library of the Führer. But she could only enter Hitler's quarters through the back door when no one was around. This secrecy discouraged Eva, who deep down dreamed of becoming the official wife of a politician. "He loved me only when it was convenient for him," she wrote in her personal diary. Politics did not interest her at all, so when Hitler was doing his business, she was frankly bored, spending evenings in the company of girlfriends or books by Oscar Wilde. At the same time, she made great efforts to impress her lover when they saw each other. She always did a beautiful hairstyle and could change 6 or 7 outfits in one day. She did not smoke in the presence of the Führer, he could not stand smoking women, and was not alone with other men. But all her attempts to marry her lover were in vain. Eva's dream came true only in April 1945, she married Hitler in the Nazi leader's bunker. 36 hours later, the newlyweds committed a double suicide. Rachele Guidi, Benito Mussolini's wife. Italy. But the Italian fascist leader, unlike his German counterpart, was a dictator not only in life, but also in bed. According to contemporaries, he treated women in a terrible way. As a teenager, he discovered all the delights of the local Italian brothel, and since then his sexual fantasies were associated with girls of easy behavior. Therefore, even as an adult man, Mussolini demanded from his women unconditional obedience and subservient adoration, not caring at all about the feelings of his many mistresses. Every day in his office delivered dozens of letters from admirers, dreaming of spending the night with him. And Mussolini personally chose which of them is worthy of such an honor. These meetings with women, sometimes married, took place behind the closed doors of his office and never continued. And with such sexual adventures of her husband had to put up with Rachele Guidi, a woman who became his second wife and mother of 5 children, the dictator's first marriage lasted only a year. They married in 1915 and lived in an official marriage for 30 years until the death of the dictator. Rachele came from a peasant family, so Mussolini did not see her as a potential political advisor, only a reliable rear and exemplary wife and housewife. And with this role Rachele perfectly coped for many years. Mistress's dictator constantly changed, but at home he always waited for his devoted wife. The only important woman in Mussolini's life, this is me, always repeated Rachele. But everything changed when the dictator met Clara Petacci. This young Italian aristocrat idolized Mussolini and from the age of 14 wrote him letters with declarations of love. He paid attention to her when in one of his fiery messages Clara enclosed her photo card. The beauty of this young lady captivated the dictator to the depths of his soul, and he made her his constant mistress. Such a long extramarital affair with one woman was highly atypical for Mussolini, so his wife Rachele became worried. She realized that she was facing a war for her husband. "It is impossible not to notice the state of intense mental tension in which this woman was in," said an employee of the German embassy in Rome. "A little provincial girl, tired, dreary, and prematurely aged." In contrast to her, Clara only blossomed energetic and daring. She understood the influence she had on the aging dictator and took full advantage of it. In April 1945, Rachele saw her husband for the last time. After that, Mussolini fled with his mistress in Switzerland, where 2 weeks later they were captured by Italian partisans and returned home. Their execution was brutal, and the dead bodies of the lovers were hung from a gas station in Piazza Loreto in Milan. Rachele outlived her husband by 34 years. She took care of preserving his legacy, raising his children and running his restaurant. Elena Ceausescu, wife of Nicolae Ceausescu, Romania. The wife of the Romanian dictator, who was nicknamed Bloody Empress, was born into a peasant family in Wallachia, once dominated by the famous Vlad Tepes. She was never noted for her academic abilities, so she finished a few grades of rural school and began to work, first as a laboratory assistant, and then as a weaver in a factory. She might not have left any trace in world history if she had not met in 1939 with a young pickpocket thief, just out of prison, named Nicolae Ceausescu. They became romantically involved and were soon married. From the very beginning of Nicolae's ascent up the political ladder, Elena supported him, having a significant impact on the life of the country. A trip to China and North Korea in the early 1970s made an indelible impression on the couple. Nicolae became enthralled watching the socialist people worship their leader, so upon returning home, he began planting a cult of personality in Romania. Journalists were ordered to exalt him, inventing ever new epithets to denote his greatness: treasure of reason, source of our light, Danube of wisdom, and so on. He spoke in public with rapt attention, not embarrassed by the fact that all the applause was staged. The receptions and celebrations organized in his honor could be the envy of the Queen herself, the British publication The Telegraph once wrote. Elena did not lag behind her husband. For starters, she, a former laboratory assistant at a chemical plant, convinced Nicolae to appoint her head of the National Institute for Chemical Research. And then she achieved that she was recognized as a luminary of science and put at the head of the Romanian Academy of Sciences. But even this was not enough to satisfy Elena's exorbitant ambitions. In 1980, she became the country's first deputy prime minister and, in fact, the second person in the state. According to The Telegraph, it was she who took the most active part in the genocide of 60,000 people and the undermining of the country's national economy. Nicolae and Elena introduced barbaric laws that severely affected the quality of life of Romanians. For example, at a certain point, the dictator and his wife decided that their citizens ate too much, and in order to save money, their diet should be reduced by 10 to 15%. In addition, only one light bulb was allowed per apartment. Electricity consumption was also ordered to be reduced in all social institutions. Because of this, in the winter of 1983, dozens of newborn babies died in hospital incubators. But to the public outrage, Nicolae and Elena had absolutely no intention of extending the austerity regime to themselves. On the contrary, they lived in a real palace, the interior of which was decorated in the style of Louis XIV. This magnificent mansion had bathrooms with gold faucets, wine cellars, swimming pools, a movie theater and even a greenhouse with exotic plants. In addition, in 1984 Nicolae Ceausescu began building the Marble Palace of the Peoples, the new Romanian government building. For the sake of this, 1/5 of Bucharest's historic buildings were demolished, and about 3 billion rubles were allocated to finance the construction. Citizen discontent reached its peak in December 1989, when the government suppressed an anti-communist rally with extremely harsh methods. Nicolae and Elena lost the support of ministers and fell into the hands of the opposition. They were tried by a military tribunal. On December 25, the dictator and his wife were shot. Photographs and videos of the massacre can still be found on the internet. That's all for now. I'll see you soon.